So we're going to take a quick look at Duffy's Valentine. This is a really funny poem, I think. I really like it because it's the main thing about this poem is it's an inversion of all of the different expectations that we have for Valentine's Day. And it's kind of like a mockery of the tradition of Valentine. So it's an anti-romantic poem, but at the same time it is still a love poem because there is a kind of like playful, affectionate kind of tone to the poem, despite it ridiculing the traditions of Valentine's Day. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the poem and the analysis. I can't read the whole poem because of copyright, because Duffy's still alive and her poetry's in copyright, so feel free to read the poem aloud yourself, or at least have a copy of it in front of you while we're going through. You can see, though, it starts with a negation, not a red rose or a satin heart. I give you an onion. It's a moon wrapped in brown paper. It promises light. So we have this kind of comical image of an onion. She employs the element of surprise, but then she also becomes kind of abstract and poetic and metaphorical about this onion in a way that then elevates the onion beyond the basic idea of, why are you giving me an onion? So yeah, it's very clever, I think. She sort of uses what's called bathos, which is like an anticlimax, and then she actually then elevates the object to a higher level. So there's some vocab here. There's not too many unusual words in this poem, but have a quick look through this vocabulary and just check that you're okay with it all before we move on. You can feel free to pause at this point if you need. Yeah, and we're going to just move on to a summary. So yeah, the idea is that, I don't give you these cliched things that you're supposed to give people on Valentine's Day, like a red rose or a satin heart. Instead, I give you an onion. The onion is a moon, and it promises to give you moonlight, like the careful undressing of love. Take it. It'll blind you with tears the way that a lover's tears would blind you. So there's the sort of complexity of love being mirrored here, not just this idealistic, perfect love that we're supposed to kind of celebrate on Valentine's Day, but, the reality of love, which is the ups and downs, the different varying tensions and emotions that love can produce. It will make your reflection turn into a wobbling photo of grief. I'm trying to be honest. So I'm not going to give you a cute card or kissogram. I give you an onion. Its fierce kiss will stay on your lips, possessive and faithful as we are, for as long as we are. Take it. Its platinum loops, and shrink them into a wedding ring if you like. It's deadly. Its scent will cling to your fingers, cling to your knife. So yeah, it's what we would call an extended metaphor, the onion, because it continues to be sort of this changing symbol of love, and it has these varying qualities that get mapped onto the varying, often difficult to navigate, like pathways of love itself. So yeah, the cute card, the kissogram, the red rose, the satin heart, these are what we call cliches. They're the sort of standard, normal portrayal of love. They're contrasted against the idea of this onion and the qualities of the onion that give these actual personal and more raw and more real depictions of how love feels to really, experience. So yeah, we don't have much information on the speaker. We don't know their age, gender, their name. We also don't know the addressee in terms of their age, gender, or name. That makes it quite universal. So it's about the feeling of love itself. It's not so much a personal poem about a specific situation. It's about the general idea of love, capital L, love. And so, yeah, the speaker isn't conventionally sentimental. They don't just like all these kind of cliches and typical things that people do to show love. They prefer this idea of truth and honesty. So as a poet, it's always your job to just really observe what really happens and try and comment on what, is actually happening in a situation. So if you're writing about love, you should comment on, the reality of love and the complexity of that, which is what Duffy is trying to do here. So we think that, the speaker actually does place a high value on the power of love, but so much so that she doesn't want to reduce it to a load of kind of simple cliches or reduce the intensity and complexity of that emotion to a sort of perfect, cute version of what it really is. So yeah, it's actually kind of hyper relatable, I think, because anyone who actually has experienced love will have experienced much more of a range of emotions surrounding that state of being than just this kind of flat perfection that Valentine's Day offers. So there's a lot of different techniques here. I'm just going to kind of whiz through them. Feel free to pause and look through in more detail. You can also download this document from the scribbly.com page, or if you're doing a full poetry collection, because it's part of various different exam boards. I think this one, like WJC, EdXL, feel free to kind of, find the whole course and download the whole course of poems as well. So for now, we'll just kind of whiz through some features, but yeah, you can go to scribbly.com if you want more depth. So yeah, symbolism. The onion is symbolic. It's also a kind of extended metaphor that sort of shifts as it goes along. There's direct address, which means that there's an addressee. This is part of the tradition of love poetry, that poems are written to a lover and they are expressing the complexity of the individual's feelings. There's also a lot of imagery, so lots and lots of different images that are linked to the onion. So you want to kind of go through probably the whole poem and circle every time there's any kind of image to do with the onion. And there's different elements and components to the onion as well. So how does it taste? How does it smell? How does it feel? How does it look? So there's a range of sensory images employed to describe that onion. So yeah, it's first person, I, and then the addressee, you. The subject is the onion. So we've got this kind of comic, surprising center to the poem that then actually does make a serious point about love. It's also dramatic monologue, so it's a speech from the point of view of an individual character. And the intended reader is a private audience, so even though we're reading this poem publicly, it's written in a way that it's meant for an individual private person to read. It has a kind of humorous and endearing tone throughout. It uses free verse, so there's no set rhyme scheme or structure. It's also composed of short stanzas followed by lengthier stanzas, so irregular line length, irregular rhyme, and irregular stanza length. I think this is to reflect the irregularity and unpredictability of love itself, the fact that love is not this static, fixed thing, but it does kind of change and adapt over time. So a little bit of context then on Duffy. She's a very, very famous modern poet, and a lot of her poetry actually is quite critical of the traditions of poetry. It's quite sort of playfully experimental in different ways. So here, she wrote this one in 1993, and it's criticizing conventional, idealized depictions of love. It's arguing for representations that are more comprehensive and honest about the repercussions of love. It uses simple, uncomplicated language so that it's kind of accessible for everyone, but it represents a viewpoint that is sidelined by mainstream society. So it's interesting, that tension between being very approachable and easy to understand as a poem, but also being quite unconventional in its approach to love. It's a postmodern poem because to read this poem and understand it properly, we have to actually understand the genre of love poetry itself. If you read this poem and you hadn't had any experience of other love poems and what they typically do with the subject of love, it wouldn't be funny to you and it wouldn't really have the right effect. So she's presupposing that we have a knowledge of the traditions and conventions of love poetry, which she's then messing around with here. So we would call that postmodern. as a genre, because postmodern literature very often tries to break down the rules and traditions of literature in kind of surprising ways. So we have some interesting attitudes as well, like some ideas about the poem. It's very unorthodox, maybe pessimistic. I don't know why that word's repeated there, sorry. It's maybe pessimistic a little bit, like it's like a bit unpositive about love. It depends on how you take it. I think it's kind of nice, but it's very fluctuating, kind of up and down with its portrayal of love. So it's a fresh viewpoint for the reader. It's also confident, like, there's a lot of imperative verbs, like here, take it. So the speaker is actually quite forceful and quite dominant with their gift to the addressee. Yeah, and also kind of, humorous, but making a serious point underneath the humor. So when you're ready, feel free to do little mind maps on these themes here and explore them a bit more in depth. And you can have a go at these essay questions and exercises as well, just to open the poem up a little bit further. So hopefully you feel quite confident on this one now. And if you don't quite get it still, what I would recommend doing is reading a few traditional love poems so you see kind of what they normally do, and then contrasting this poem with those as well. That would help you go a bit deeper into what Duffy's trying to achieve here. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you guys soon in a future lesson.